Here's what nobody tells you about the 4% rule. It was never designed to be a retirement plan. The research behind it studied 30-year periods that ended decades ago. And the guy who created it, well, he's been saying it needs to be updated for years. But millions of Americans are still using it as their retirement planning gospel. And if you're one of them, this video will either validate your plan or it might completely change it. The 4% rule is just the beginning of a conversation, and using it as your retirement withdrawal plan could leave you with significant blind spots. I'm Joe Bogan. I've spent 8 years helping people navigate the highest stakes financial decision that they will ever make: how to spend money in retirement that they're not planning to earn back at any point. Today, I'm walking through 5 critical factors that the 4% rule misses and the framework to help plan for retirement income. Let's start with what the 4% rule is. It's a systematic withdrawal strategy. You take 4% of your portfolio in year 1 and then increase that number each year with inflation. It sounds neat and tidy, but there are 5 big reasons that approach falls short in the real world. We all agree that conditions determine all sorts of choices that we're going to make in life. If winter's coming, we're going to prepare for the colds. If you're going to go to a wedding, you're going to dress differently than if you're headed to a football game with friends. So if we naturally adjust in all of these other parts of our life, why do we expect to hold steady with something as complex as retirement spending, especially when the world around us keeps changing? First, it was built in a different economic era. The 4% rule came from research by William Bengen, published in 1994, over 30 years ago. But we often cite this number without remembering the context with which it was brought about in. Bengen's goal at the time was not to give us this one-size-fits-all approach to retirement. He observed in the media storylines at that time saying that you use your average portfolio returns to determine how much you can withdraw from your portfolio. And he wanted to challenge that and determine what an actual safe withdrawal rate would be. He looked at historic market data and concluded that a 4% withdrawal rate from a portfolio evenly split between stocks and bonds survived all 30-year periods in U.S. history. And that was groundbreaking back then, and it contributed to the discussion. But think about what the world looked like in the 90s. Bond yields were averaging around 6% and inflation was moderate. The economy was strong, driven by rising stock market, the advent of personal computers, and favorable demographics as baby boomers, the largest generation in U.S. history at that time, were just about hitting their peak earning years. In today's economy, corporate bonds yield 4%, and in many recent years, they've dropped to low single digits. That's a big deal, because the math that made the 4% rule work back then might not translate in today's economy if half your portfolio is sitting in bonds earning less than what Bengen's model assumed at that time. Your safe withdrawal rate may not be as applicable as it was back then. That fact alone should raise a red flag to indicate this needs to be adapted. The second point is that it ignores real-life market adaptability. The 4% rule assumes that markets just are going to behave like they used to, but they don't. When Bengen ran his analysis, he was using data from a period in U.S. history where the economy was quite resilient, returns on stocks and bonds were high, and inflation was relatively low compared to other parts in the world. In that world, a 4% withdrawal rate worked almost 100% of the time. But there are different realities when the 4% rule was not a safe withdrawal rate that are important to consider. Research by economist Wade Pfau tested this same 4% rule across 19 different countries over an 80-year period using similar portfolios. And what were the results? Well, in countries like Italy, the 4% rule failed 80% of the time. In nearly every country, periods of high inflation and low growth reduced the rule's effectiveness. Now, I'm not bringing that up to scare anyone. The U.S. has unique strengths that I believe hold quite true in today's world. We look at the future with plenty of innovation and well-run corporations and a dynamic economy that many other places don't have. And the U.S. makes up the large majority of the global stock market capitalization. But The point is that the safe withdrawal rate depends on these broader conditions. And without a plan that has an ability to account for those changes and monitor those changes, your retirement strategy could be built on a ground that could potentially shift, making your foundation potentially unstable. Fowles' work shows the 4% rule should flex depending on the environment. And that doesn't mean there isn't a solution for this or that the future is not bright. 4% rule could equally be conservative if the future is better. But the fixed withdrawal rate rules do not flex depending on the environment. Poses the risk of being too risky and overspending when conditions aren't great, or being overly conservative and underspending when conditions are really strong. Either way, you may fall off track with what might be ideal from a spending standpoint. The third point here is it's not going to adapt to personal circumstances. A flaw of the 4% rule is that there's no personal context here. The original 4% research assumed a 30-year window for retirement, but what if you retire early at 55 and you have longevity in your family to 95? That's 40 years, not 30. A flat 4% in that scenario might overshoot early and leave you short on your investments later. It also ignores taxes if most of your money is in pre-tax accounts like 401ks, or if you're in a high tax area where you live in a state or area with significant taxes. 4% really isn't 4% because some of it's going to go to the government and the IRS. If you miss that detail, you might be setting yourself up for a painful surprise later down the road. And then there's the unique investment setup that everyone has. How your assets are structured for your personal investments and your risk tolerance, where they sit, what assets you own, how they're going to be taxed, what mix they're in, and which types of accounts. These are all going to play into what the potential optimal withdrawal rate is for your situation. So while 4% treats everyone the same, no two retirements are exactly the same. And like I said, there is a solution for that and possible personalization there, but it's not found in static withdrawal rate rules. And fourth, the fixed withdrawal rate assumes that everyone has the same investment mix. The original research assumed that a portfolio was half stocks and half bonds. Everyone's going to be different. Your portfolio probably doesn't look like that. Subsequent research, even by Bengen himself, found that if you increase equity exposure to someone between 50 to 75%, you might support a modestly higher withdrawal rate, maybe up to 4.6% if your portfolio includes smaller capitalization stocks. And many people that are relying on the safe withdrawal rate rules don't even know that Bengen himself suggested everyone relying on this should have at least 50% equity in retirement. Some people might have less than that. More equities has a potential to improve your long-term portfolio potential, although there will be more volatility. The one-size-fits-all portfolio is not going to be suitable. You have to evaluate your time, your goals, your planned spending, your risk, and the 4% rule is just guidance. It needs to be refined further for each unique situation. It's like prescribing the same diet to someone who runs marathons to someone who's sitting at their desk all day. It just doesn't make sense. Everyone's unique. The fifth main point on why the 4% rule fails is it's failing to adapt to real-life spending patterns. Here's the final issue. It assumes retirees are going to spend in this straight line. But that's not how life really works. Most people spend more in early retirement years with home projects, bucket list experiences, more time with family, and they're probably going to spend a little bit less as they age. But here's something that most people don't realize. More than 70% of retirees experience a spending shock of some kind. That's an unexpected cost that blows past their retirement budget in the first 5 years of retirement. The 4% rule doesn't give you any way to respond to what happens. It doesn't help you come back to the fold with your financial plan and adjust. So it's not just rigid, it's just unresponsive to the fluidity of real life. So if the 4% rule can't handle these economic shifts, can't account for your unique situation, and doesn't reflect how people are most likely to actually spend in retirement, what should you be doing instead? Well, let me introduce you to a plan for better retirement spending. It's called the critical path framework. Instead of assuming a static withdrawal rate, this approach calculates what the value of your portfolio should be over time based on your actual planned consumption. Think of it like a GPS for your personal finances. We're going to create an actual map of your critical path, your ideal portfolio trajectory given your age, income, expenses, lifestyle, and legacy goals. The start of your portfolio is the start of your retirement here in this part, and the end can be anything. It can be zero if you want to plan to try and spend down your portfolio close to zero, or it can be 100,000 or 500,000 if that's the goal you have for your plan. Any given year, you're supposed to move along this line, and if you're going to experience a lot of change, surprise expenses, market changes, taxes, healthcare costs, these are events that might move you up or down away from your critical path. With this plan, we can determine how far you are going to deviate and if you need to make some adjustments depending on the changing factors in your life and the markets and the world. If you're above that line, you may be able to spend more. If you're below it, it's a signal if you're too far away to consider lowering with your withdrawals and pivoting to get back on track. So how does this work? I'm going to give you an academically supported method that you can use to put some guardrails around your portfolio withdrawals and help you stay more in line with this sort of critical path methodology. But before that, if you want to get some personalized feedback on this retirement planning, or you don't want to calculate and do the guardrails yourself, you can just go into our description and click the link. All you have to do is fill out a few quick questions, and we will send you a completely free confidential video breaking down some of the ideas and feedback on your situation that could be really valuable. Now, let's dive into how to build a guardrail-based withdrawal plan. All you need is an Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheets, and listen up and review this a couple times if you need to, because if you do this properly, you will have a plan for your retirement withdrawals and spending that helps you respond to a world that's constantly changing and help keep you on track. It means you can potentially get more income from your retirement assets, and I believe it will give you much greater peace of mind knowing that there are clear, identifiable signals that you can review to know when to make an adjustment if conditions are harsh, so that you do have clear boundaries and you're much less likely to fall prey to excessive fear when headlines and markets are shaky. So here we go. This is how to build a guardrail-based withdrawal plan. You first need to start with a base case withdrawal rate. There's new updated research on withdrawal rates from Morningstar. It gives you a breakdown of what safe withdrawal rate they calculated depending on your unique time horizon and the percentage of equities and risk tolerance that you have in your unique plan. So you need to review that, research, and come up with a withdrawal rate. From there, you can apply the guardrails methodology. Research by Guyton and Klinger indicates your safe withdrawal rate can be potentially increased by 20% if you're applying this methodology. So if you're willing to make adjustments based on a structured guardrail schedule, you multiply that safe withdrawal rate by 1.2. And from there, you need to figure out your guardrails. You're going to calculate 20% above that guardrail safe withdrawal rate and 20% below that guardrail safe withdrawal rate. So for easy math, an example, if you have a 5% planned withdrawal rate, 4% is your lower guardrail and 6% is your upper guardrail. In any given year, if no guardrail is triggered, you keep spending at your withdrawal rate, and you can adjust your withdrawals upward with inflation from the previous year. You're good to keep spending and increasing with inflation as long as no guardrail is triggered. Now, if your spending or market changes in any year cause you to drift below or above your guardrail spending percentages, then you make a 10% adjustment up or down depending on which guardrail was triggered. So, for example, if markets go up and your withdrawal rate shrinks to less than the previous year's guardrail percentage, you can actually increase your spending over and above inflation by 10%. And if markets crash and your planned portfolio withdrawal rate goes above the 20% guardrail, then you're going to have to cut your portfolio withdrawals by 10% in that given year. So if you have $1 million in your portfolio and you're spending $50,000 at 5%, your portfolio might grow to $1.275 million. You can increase 2% with inflation and an additional 10% because your withdrawal rate dipped below the lower guardrail of 4%, since $50,000 divided by $1.275 million is 3.9. 0.9%. Now, on the flip side, it's also true that if your portfolio declines, you might have to reduce your planned withdrawals. If you experience a portfolio decline of 20%, you're at $800,000 and your portfolio withdrawal rate surges above 6%, your upper guardrail, you're going to need to reduce your withdrawals by 10% to help with your portfolio planning to make sure you stay on that critical path. So basically, what you're going to do is set these guardrails up and then monitor it at least a few times per year to check if adjustments are in order for your plan or if you can continue spending or possibly get an inflation bump. It improves your confidence by giving you the discernment you need in a complex financial world. It might sound like a little bit of extra work to build this spreadsheet and keep track of these things, but remember, this adjustment process can help you actually spend more money at a relatively conservative risk level. So if you're unwilling to make those adjustments to your spending and implement a plan like this, you're going to need to be more conservative and spend less because the risk of running out of money increases if you stray too far and you're unwilling to make course corrections. Having a spending plan like this will help you ensure that you're not shorting yourself too, and you're not missing out on spending plans to really enjoy the fruits of your nest egg. Now, there are some caveats to consider. First of all, you're going to need to remember to adjust your withdrawal rate based on your age and your time horizon. That could change. And this is a great tool, but I do believe there is a lot of nuance. And as a financial planner, I aim to give clients guardrail-based plans that I do feel like are stronger in a number of ways because we have software. It's going to allow for greater fluidity of computing a variety of different variables using statistical methods of analysis that are shown to contribute value to this sort of planning. We also offer perspectives as advisors, how to interpret things like Morningstar data. For example, there's some aspects to the Morningstar data that I'm not crazy about. So there's some refinement involved with building a plan like this, but in fairness to this method, it is worth, if you're able to implement the steps I described, potentially thousands of dollars to anyone who's going to do it and implement it. It does a good job and is based on academic research. I would estimate that it does at least 70 to 80% what you can do with fancy software and detailed planning. The second thing to consider is that it's just one tool in a retirement planning toolbox. There's so many other dimensions, such as taxes, asset location, investment location decisions, planning for Social Security, healthcare, just to name a few. So this withdrawal planning is great, but it needs to be nested within the context of a broader retirement planning strategy that needs to be aligned with your unique needs. So be sure that you're researching all of these other areas. For a lot of our clients, we're incorporating a variety of elements. We're doing tax planning, we're doing time segmentation with different buckets on our investments on top of other strategies. So you're going to need to spend time to research all of these different tools and make decisions on how you want to approach things for your income planning. Retirement spending does not have to be a mystery, and it doesn't have to be scary, but it does have to be real and based on the aspects of reality that we need to adapt to. If you want help or feedback on your current plan and your retirement outlook that reflects how you actually live, not just formulas that are in the media and what the Wall Street Journal thinks you should do, click the link in the description below. You'll find a quick survey where you fill out a few questions, and what we'll do is we'll send you back a video completely free, completely confidential, and give you some feedback based on our retirement planning philosophy, what we think about your situation, what are some things that you might want to consider if you want to create a flexible and confident plan for your retirement. Because there's a big difference between having a plan and having a process that you can stick with that's going to help keep you on track for decades. So let's make sure that your plan actually fits your life.